Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It's sad when the client does not fulfill his obligations under the contract and then threatens to sue, but our OP was ready for such a scenario and came out of that situation very nicely. I'm sure you'll love it. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Here's 33% of your website. I had a trophy wife client who had a frozen yogurt business paid for by her husband. They contacted me and asked me to design and build a new website for her business. I gave them a quote and they asked if they could pay in 3 installments. After we all agreed to the terms, I'd written approval and received my 33% deposit. I got cracking. We had regular check-ins and they were happy with the progress until one day they just went quiet. They were already behind on the second payment and I was growing impatient. I was done with the site and just needed final approval and payment before launching it, but I couldn't get a hold of either of them. I eventually got hold of the lady at her day job after weeks of being ghosted. She calmly told me that they found someone cheaper and that they won't be paying the remaining 66%, even though the project was complete and all their feedback was addressed. She told me that I could just give her 33% of the files and move on with my life. I made it clear that websites don't really work if you only upload 33% of the files, sarcastically, at which point she hung up the phone. I still had their FTP details for their brand domain that housed their current, old website, so I decided to take revenge. I created a page with an animated fake loading bar that was stuck at 33%. Underneath the loading bar was the message, "This company does not pay their suppliers. They decided to pay only a third of the price, so now they have only a third of a website." I went as far as to download the website files, split it up in roughly 3 portions, file size, and upload a zip folder containing a third of the files to the FTP folder. This way, I actually gave them the 33% they paid for and could show the file size to prove it. I also permanently deleted the old site's files from the folder so they couldn't restore from a backup. Not that they'd have a clue how to do that. They threatened to sue me. I'm still waiting. Judges generally don't take kindly to people who don't pay their contractual bills. I'd sell the account to a debt collector or file a lien on whatever real estate they own. And our second story. Going overseas but want to keep your numbers? Fine, I'll activate roaming for you and your family. So this story takes place over 10 years ago when I was working FOH for my country's largest telco. On this day, a man and his family walk in. I'd signed him, his wife, and 5 children up a few months prior, and remembering how fun our previous interaction had been, I walked up and greeted him by name and asked him what I could do for him this time. The conversation was as follows. Dad is dad, me is me. Dad: "We're heading overseas next week for a few months. I need to have roaming activated on my account." "Oh, that's easy. Should take a few minutes to add the necessary codes and grab the paperwork for you." Thinking he was just referring to his mobile number. "Are we just adding the codes to your number and your wife's number? Also, do you know what your projected usage is going to be, as I might suggest an alternative measure to activating roaming?" "No, I want all the kids' numbers activated too. We plan to use all our mobiles like we normally do." I balked slightly and looked at the kids, who were all glued to their hip tops, sidekicks if you're from the States. I should point out that the plan that Hip Tops provided allowed, at the time, unlimited text, email, Hip Top IM, internet browsing, etc., but only if they were being used on our network, period. Me: "Are you certain? The Hip Top plans for your children are only valid when used on..." And he cut me off. "Yes, I'm certain. Just activate the roaming on my account." I really must insist on suggesting that I began, but was cut off short again. "I don't want to hear your suggestions. I just want roaming activated on the account. Now do your job and activate the roaming." More sternly, "Sir, the Hip Top plans don't cover usage outside of the country. If your children use them overseas, the bill will be..." "Where's your manager? I want to speak to them." Giving a sigh of defeat, I seated them and went out the back to grab some of the relevant paperwork and grab my manager. My manager at the time asked me why I needed so much roaming TNC's paperwork. When I explained the situation, she was hesitant to let me go ahead with what was about to happen and after trying to explain to the customer the potential bill and offer the suggestion to activate a prepaid number overseas, he said he still wanted roaming. My manager nodded at me. Malicious compliance mode, activate. After close to 40 minutes of navigating some minor errors and a call to our BOH, the paperwork was signed and they were on their way. My manager and I went into the system for a while to run through some rough calculations on their potential bill based off the previous usage. For their 3-month holiday, we predicted that each bill was going to be close to $6,000 to $7,000 just based on the standard usage of their bills. 4 months later, the dad returned, and boy was he PO'd. He had with him 3 large envelopes, heavy with paper. He walked up to the desk I was at while replying to some emails, threw the envelopes on the desk and screamed, "What the F is this? Do you think this is a joke?" Me, very confused and defensive at this moment. "What the hell's your problem? What are you even talking about?" "This," he screamed, spit flying from his mouth, dumping the 3 large bills he'd accrued while overseas all over my desk from the envelopes. "What is all this?" I picked up the bills, and even I was shocked. Each bill was roughly over $10,000 in total, clocking up past the $30,000 mark. "These look like bills, sir, and quite substantial ones." "I know they're bills. Why are they so effing expensive?" I flipped the pages over, already knowing what I was going to see, and turned them to him and pointed at the relevant page. "These are the charges for your roaming costs, sir. We tried to warn you this would happen." "No, you didn't." "Actually, we did. I pulled out the signed copies of the roaming paperwork that I had in a folder on my desk, knowing that he would be back because of this exact situation, and flipped to the relevant page that he had initialed and handed it to him smugly. As you can see, your initial is on the following page, stipulating the costs incurred from roaming, as well as your signature on the line accepting all relevant costs." While he was reading through it, his face only got redder, throwing the paperwork on the desk. "This is extortion," he whispered angrily. "No, sir, this is standard business practice. We attempted on multiple occasions to inform you of this, but you failed to listen, so we merely complied with your request. Is there anything else I can help you understand, sir?" After a few short moments of defeated silence, I packed his bills back in their envelope and handed them to him and asked him to leave. Begrudgingly, he left, but not quietly, shouting all sorts of profanity and accusations as he left. Never did see him again, though. Maybe next time he'll read the T&Cs a little more closely or listen to those who were trying to warn him about his poor choices. Entitled parents want us to pay their debt. The 4 of us siblings are working. Average jobs, average pay, enough to get by and afford little luxuries. My father works, high pay. My mom had her business, high income, but due to the pandemic, business had to be put on hold for a bit. Since my dad has high income, we weren't worried about our mom and the house they're paying for. They recently acquired a rest house in the countryside. Until my dad bought a car on loan from his company that took almost all of his salary. So he borrowed money from a friend to pay that loan, and now we're going to pay that loan with interest. We also need to pay for the house that we'll never own, so we're paying those, and then we thought, okay, let's just help them get through it. Until last month when he squandered the money to pay for his house, when he's not paying the friend, when he's not providing for my mom with what he had left, when he bought a washing machine on loan as a gift for my grandma, a loan we're also paying for. When he went into a deal with a friend to start a business he doesn't have money for. I'm at my wit's end. I'm close to cutting off ties with him. I don't talk to him. He can message me, but I don't open his chats. I'm civil. My mom's almost the same. She asks for money in the most guilt-trippy way. We give her an allowance every month on top of us paying their loans, but it's not enough because she gives it to her siblings who need money. So I think it's time to cut them off. I called and said they need to sell the rest home and recoup what they can. They aren't just living beyond their means, they're living beyond me and my siblings' means as well now. Sounds like they're both very irresponsible and trying to live way beyond their means. And our last story. I pay rent, so I own this house. Backstory. My parents used to own a house on a big land. When my older siblings went away for college, the house felt too big for our needs, so my parents decided to sell the house, but not all the land. They built a smaller house on the part of the land they didn't sell. A few years later, we moved to a city 2 hours away and kept the house as a place to go during the summer. My parents decided to rent the house as it was well located and had a really nice view. Renting it meant that they could use the money towards the mortgage and taxes. Enter our Karen. Karen and her boyfriend rented the place so she could be closer to her work. From the start, my dad made it clear the place was for rent, and my parents planned on living in that house after retiring. At that time, both of them planned to work for at least another 20 years. They would, of course, notify Karen in advance when they wanted to take back the house, so she would have plenty of time to find a new place. In return, they asked that she notify them in advance should she wish to move out so they could find a new renter. The lease also stated that my parents would have some of their things locked in storage in the basement as well as in a shed on the property, and that they would always call Karen before dropping by to get something out of storage, which was in the basement and connected by the garage, so they wouldn't even disturb Karen. For a few years, Karen was an okay renter. She paid the rent through a check each month. She smoked inside and didn't take care of the land, but my dad didn't make a fuss about it. Real trouble started after around 12 years. Every few months, Karen's checks would bounce back. My dad would call her to ask about it. Karen would profusely apologize and rectify the situation. Then it became every other month until it was every month. Finally, my dad had enough and called her about the lease and the rent. During the call, Karen argued that since she'd been paying rent for the past 12 years, the house was now hers. My dad was shocked since that came out of nowhere. He tried to explain to her that she was renting the place like they had agreed on since the beginning. Karen went on a beef fit about how she had paid so much over the years, and she was the one living there and taking care of the place, which she was not at all. Therefore, it should be hers. She threatened to take my dad to court. Now, where I live, there are many laws which protect the renter, and it can be a real bee to deal with when you have a nasty renter. My dad hired a lawyer to make sure everything was in order. After a meeting with Karen, where a lawyer was present, she realized she didn't have much of a case since all paperwork concerning the house was at my dad's name, and the original lease clearly stated that it was a rental. So my dad gave her the shortest possible notice of eviction allowed by law. Bye, Karen. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.